My stepfamily left me to die in the mountains. Now I'm the one they're begging to find, and this morning I woke up to a phone blinking so violently I thought it might crack in two. 52 missed calls, all from numbers I never saved but didn't need to. I knew exactly who they were. After all, it's not easy to forget the people who left you to die on a mountain when you were 16 years old. It happened just over a decade ago, but the memory hasn't aged a day. It was supposed to be a family retreat, some twisted experiment in healing. Roy, my stepfather, called it a reset, a way to get everyone on the same page. He said the fresh air would help clear out old grudges and make space for forgiveness. That's not what happened. There were 6 of us crammed into that dusty van, heading into the Bitterroot Mountains like we were on some scenic death march. Roy drove like he owned the road, talking nonstop about nature and unity. Diane, my stepmother, sat next to him with that tight smile she used whenever she was pretending to care. My stepsister Bianca and stepbrothers Colin and Derek shared snacks and inside jokes in the back seat. I sat near the door, counting mile markers and pretending I wasn't already planning my escape. I was the mistake that haunted their picture-perfect lives. The leftover. My mom had died when I was 5, and my dad married Diane less than a year later. He said we needed a new beginning. What he meant was, he needed a family that didn't include me. They didn't need to say it out loud. I saw it in the small things. The missing Christmas stocking with my name, the empty chair at birthday dinners, the way I was handed a mop while the others got to go to the movies. I convinced myself for years that if I tried hard enough, they might see me. They might tolerate me, maybe even like me. But I was always just the shadow at the edge of their lives. So when Roy announced the trip, I packed my bag like it mattered. I brought extra socks and my one decent hoodie, told myself this time could be different. It wasn't. The first day, they made constant jokes. Hope Nora doesn't get dragged off by a mountain lion. We should tie a rope to her so she doesn't get lost. Every time they laughed, I forced a smile so they wouldn't know it was killing me. On the third morning, we started a trail up to a ridge. It wasn't marked on any of the maps they handed out at the Welcome Lodge. Roy said he'd done it before, and we trusted him. I was the slowest by far, not because I wasn't fit, but because they gave me the biggest pack. No one said it out loud, but they made me carry the water and extra gear because I didn't contribute enough. By the time we neared the top, I was drenched in sweat and my calves were screaming. We stopped at a clearing that overlooked a deep valley, jagged and beautiful, like something out of a dream. Everyone dropped their bags and posed for selfies, stretching like they'd finished a marathon. I wandered a few feet off, needing to breathe, to just exist without eyes rolling at me. That's when I heard it. The shuffle of feet behind me, and then Bianca's voice, light and taunting. Let's see if she figures it out on her own. I turned around, and the clearing was empty. Their backpacks? Gone. The trail behind me? Silent. The family dog, usually tethered to Roy's belt, was missing too. I called out once, Roy, and then again, louder, Diane. Nothing. At first, I thought it was a prank, something stupid meant to scare me. But when 15 minutes passed, then 30, then an hour, I realized they weren't coming back. They had left me. Not lost me. Not forgotten. Left. I was 16. No phone. Roy said the signal would ruin the experience and took them all. No map. They said I didn't need one. I had a half-full water bottle, someone else's energy bar, and the kind of panic that doesn't scream. It settles into your lungs and presses until you can barely think. But I didn't cry. I didn't sit and scream. I started walking. Somewhere in the fog of that hike, I remembered passing a ranger outpost on the way up, maybe 8 or 10 miles back. I followed the sun the best I could and read the trail like a riddle. It took all day, but I made it back. Stumbled into the station just as the sun was bowing behind the peaks. The ranger's name was Harriet. She looked me over and said I looked like hell. I told her I got separated from my group. She asked if I wanted to call them. I shook my head and said no. She didn't press. Maybe she'd seen this before. That night, she gave me a cot, a warm meal, and a quiet place to sleep. I lay in the dark with a full stomach and made a decision. I would never go back. No tearful goodbyes, no dramatic confrontations. Just silence. The only way to kill the version of me they hated was to disappear. Completely. I left the ranger station at sunrise, walking down the road with no real plan, just one goal: I couldn't let them find me. I didn't want to give them the chance to spin it into something it wasn't. They didn't lose me. They ditched me. And I needed that to stay true, even if I was the only one who ever knew it. Harriet drove me into Twin Falls, gave me an envelope with $40 and a business card for a youth shelter. She said I looked older than 16, and when I told her I was 18, she just nodded. Maybe she knew it was a lie. Maybe she didn't care. Either way, I was grateful. At the Greyhound station, I stared at the list of destinations for a long time. I didn't want to go somewhere familiar or logical. I picked the place that sounded furthest from the version of myself they'd built back home. Helena, Montana. I didn't know anyone there, had no connections, no roots, no expectations. That was the point. The first few weeks blurred together in a haze of cold nights and church basements. I washed dishes in a diner for tips that barely fed me. I learned to sleep in shifts, curled up on bus stop benches and charity shelters where silence was rare and safety was negotiable. But I was free. And freedom, even when it's freezing, tastes better than fear. Eventually, I found a bakery run by a woman named Lacey who needed help with early prep. I told her I was 19, that I'd aged out of the foster system. Another lie. She squinted at me like she knew better, but handed me an apron anyway. Lacey was the first person in years who spoke to me like I was something more than dead weight. She taught me how to knead dough, how to temper chocolate, and how to stay quiet when the customers got too loud. I never told her the truth, but she gave me what I needed: structure, trust, and the kind of patience that doesn't come with strings. My apartment came a year later. A single room above a pawn shop with a broken heater and a drafty window. It didn't matter. It was mine. I hung thrift store curtains and kept my shoes by the door like I lived in a real place. I still had nightmares, but now I had walls to scream into instead of pine trees and moonlight. About 6 months in, Lacey handed me a flyer for GED classes. I hadn't been to school since the week before the mountain. I was scared I wouldn't remember anything, but I went anyway. The instructor, a sharp-tongued woman named Dana, saw through me in the first week. She never asked where I came from or why I flinched every time someone slammed a door. She just taught. Slowly, deliberately. She told me I was quick, that my brain worked differently, not wrong. I hadn't heard anything like that before. I almost cried when she said it, but I didn't. Over time, I stopped checking social media. I had used library computers for a while, mostly to search for Bianca's profile or see if Roy had posted anything about me. They hadn't. No missing persons report, no outreach. Nothing. The most I ever found was a photo from a year after they left me, Bianca grinning in a college dorm, captioned, "Miss my little chaos monster." The photo showed the two of us as kids, covered in flour, fake smiles pasted across our faces. She hadn't missed me. She missed the family prop, the emotional punching bag. So I stopped searching. I deleted every trace of my name, changed it on every document I could. My new ID said Nora Reed, age 19. I made it stick. By the time I turned 20 for real, I had a full-time job, a worn mattress, and a quiet life. No one hit me. No one told me I was too much. I enrolled in a 2-year culinary program at a community college in Boise. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Lacey helped with the essay. Dana helped edit the application. I told the truth in the only way I knew how. I wrote about survival, about walking out of the woods and not waiting for rescue. Not for sympathy, either, just for clarity. I learned that peace doesn't always come like thunder. Sometimes it comes in the form of a clean counter, a fridge with food, and a bed that doesn't have conditions attached. Years passed. I kept my head down, worked in kitchens, taught a few community classes, and eventually got a job managing inventory at a mid-sized bakery. It wasn't a dream life, but it was solid, and I built it one quiet day at a time. Then this morning happened. My phone vibrated nonstop from the moment the sun hit my window. I groaned, reached over, and saw the number, unknown. The notifications were stacked high. 52 missed calls, 3 voicemails, 11 text messages. At first, I thought someone had the wrong number. Then I opened the first message. "Nora, please call me. It's urgent. Bianca." I dropped the phone on the floor. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. It had been 10 years. No contact. Not a word. Not even a spam birthday message. Now this? I didn't call back. Instead, I opened the window and let the cold air hit my face. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and stared at the screen. One voicemail came in while I watched. I didn't listen to it. A few hours later, the text kept rolling in. Dad's not doing well. Please come back. I didn't know what happened. Derek, you deserve to hear the truth. I deleted the first few without reading them. Then I stopped at one. Look, I thought you just ran off. I didn't know they left you. I swear. Derek. That one made me pause. Not because I believed him, but because it was proof. Proof that even after all this time, they were still rewriting the story. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were trying to get ahead of the version of the story where I wasn't broken, where I didn't vanish, where I didn't rebuild. They were scared of what I might say, of what I had become. I didn't respond right away. I sat there, phone in hand, and called Dana instead. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, kiddo, everything okay? I didn't answer at first. Then I whispered, I think they found me. There was a long silence. Then she said, clear and calm, you don't owe them anything, Nora. I know, I said, but I didn't feel it yet. That night, I poured a glass of cheap red wine and sat at the same table where I'd planned my escape all those years ago. The table where I'd mapped out job applications, school forms, and grocery lists. It was scratched and stained and held more truth than any family photo album. The phone was still blinking. More texts had come in. I'm sorry. We just want to talk. You weren't supposed to get hurt. I scrolled slowly. Not one message said, we abandoned you. Not one admitted it outright. They were still trying to soften it, still pretending it wasn't what it was. I opened the last message and stared at it for a long time. I didn't know. I thought you'd caught up. Please talk to me. Derek. I didn't reply. Not yet. But something told me the story wasn't over. Not for them. And not for me either. 2 days passed before I said anything back. I thought if I ignored it long enough, they might fade back into silence the way they had after the mountain. But the messages didn't stop. If anything, they grew louder, more desperate, more frantic, more crafted to look like concern but smelling like control. Bianca sent a photo. An old one. Me and her on a trail, grinning like the smiles weren't fake. The caption read, always a little wild. Come home, Nor. I almost threw my phone through the wall. That same afternoon, I got a message through LinkedIn of all places. From Kayla, an old neighbor from before everything went dark. She said she'd seen Bianca's post. Just so you know, she wrote, they're spinning the story. They're telling people you ran off. The lie landed like a slap across my face. They were already reshaping the narrative. I wasn't abandoned anymore. I was emotional, impulsive, the troubled one who walked away. Because if they admitted the truth, the whole family history would crack open at the center like a dropped plate. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again, a pen in one hand and my phone in the other. I had planned every chapter of my adult life on that chip tabletop. I had written my name, my new address, job applications, school forms. I had never written anything about the rich. Until then, I didn't reply to Bianca or Roy. I didn't even open their voicemails. But Derek, he was the one I couldn't quite shake. He had always been quiet, the one who never spoke up but never laughed either. I didn't trust him, but I believed he might be the only one left who wasn't entirely made of stone. So I sent a single message. What do you want? The reply came almost instantly, like he'd been waiting by the screen. Dad's dying. Kidney failure. It's bad. He's been asking for you. I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. Ask him what I smelled like when you left me on that ridge. He took 5 minutes to answer. 5 long minutes where I nearly turned the phone off and tossed it into the sink. Finally, he responded. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. We came back. You were gone. I read it 3 times, trying to decide what part made me want to scream the most. The audacity to claim they returned. The implication that it had all been a misunderstanding. The cowardice in every syllable. I didn't reply. I just sat in the dark until the silence became louder than the ringing in my ears. The next day, I got a call from an Idaho number I didn't recognize. I almost declined it, but something in me said to pick up. Hi, it's Kayla again. I saw something weird, she said, voice soft. Bianca posted a photo of you two again. This time she called it a chapter we never wanted to close. People are commenting, asking if you're okay. They think you vanished because you were overwhelmed, not because you were left behind. My stomach flipped. They're rewriting everything, I said under my breath. Of course they are, Kayla replied. They're not going to admit what they did. Not after this long. Before she hung up, she said something that stuck with me more than any of the apologies that would follow. If you ever decide to face them, I'll back you up. You're not alone. That night, I opened my laptop and searched their names. Roy came up first. Local news article. The family hardware store he'd run for 30 years was closing. Business had dropped. The article said they were struggling. Of course they were. I found Bianca next. Instagram full of carefully filtered perfection, new baby, house in the suburbs, inspirational captions about healing and family unity. Her bio read, wife, sister, daughter, mental health advocate. The irony knocked the breath out of me. Derek messaged again 2 days later. He said he'd meet me anywhere, just to talk. He promised no surprises, no ambushes, just one conversation. I agreed under one condition: public place, neutral ground, 1 hour. We met at a greasy diner off the highway, halfway between Boise and the town I swore I'd never return to. I parked outside and sat in my car for almost 20 minutes, keys still in the ignition, heart pounding so loud it drowned out every thought. When I finally stepped inside, he was already seated at a booth, nervously fiddling with the sugar packets. He stood up when he saw me, but I didn't hug him. I just sat down across from him and kept my coat on. The waitress brought us coffee. He thanked her. I didn't say a word. You look good, he said after a moment. Really good. I didn't respond. He sighed and shifted in his seat. Look, I know you don't owe me anything. I just wanted to explain. You've had 10 years, I said, voice flat. Go ahead. He stared at the coffee like it might give him courage. I thought it was a prank. A bad one. I thought we were coming back for you. You reached the car, I said, cutting him off. You left. His mouth tightened. Roy said you'd catch up. That you needed to figure it out. Bianca laughed. Diane didn't say anything. I didn't flinch. You all left together. No one stopped it. He nodded, shame creeping into his face. I was 17. I didn't know how to fight him. You knew how to stay quiet, I said. There was a long silence. Then he slid a folded piece of paper across the table. What's this? I asked, not touching it. He wrote you something. Roy. He's too weak to travel. He wanted you to read it. I stared at it for a full minute before I picked it up and shoved it in my coat pocket. You don't have to forgive him, Derek said, voice low. He said he remembers the way you looked when you turned around. He said he never forgot. I stood up. I'm not here to fix him. I just needed to hear the truth from one of you. He nodded, and I needed to say it. I should have said it a long time ago. I left the diner without saying goodbye. The letter burned in my pocket like a second heartbeat. I didn't read it that night. I waited until the house was dark and the streets were empty. When I opened it, Roy's handwriting was shakier than I remembered. 5 lines. I was wrong. You didn't deserve it. I thought I was making you tougher. I see now I broke something. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I remember. That last word hit harder than anything else. He remembered. He had always remembered. And still, no one came back. A week after I read the letter, I packed a small bag and filled my car's tank with more hesitation than fuel. I wasn't going for closure, not for forgiveness, and definitely not for reconciliation. I was going to see the truth in someone's eyes for the first time since I was left behind. There was power in that. One final exhale after a decade of breath held underwater. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I just drove west with the heater on low and the windows cracked to keep me grounded. The closer I got to the town I once called home, the more it all began to feel like fiction, like something I'd read in a bad novel about betrayal and survival. But the memories didn't lie. They rose up mile by mile, stubborn and sharp. I arrived just before sunset, pulling into the hospice lot with my heart pressed so tight in my chest it barely beat. The building looked like it had been dipped in silence. The air outside was stale, and the lobby smelled like antiseptic and lemon-scented effort. A nurse walked me to his room, her steps careful, voice quiet, as if the building might collapse from a single sound too loud. He's awake, she said. He's expecting you. I didn't respond. I stood outside the room for a long moment. breathing in and out like I could filter out the past. Then I walked in. He looked smaller than I remembered, his arms thinner, skin pale, face sunken like time had caved in parts of him that used to tower. When he saw me, his lips parted, like he might smile, but he didn't. "Nora," he rasped, voice dry and low, like gravel scraping against pavement. I didn't move closer. I stayed by the door, letting him see the space between us. "You came," he said, surprised but trying to sound like he'd expected it all along. "You asked," I replied, voice steady, despite the fire rising behind my ribs. He shifted under the thin blanket. "I didn't think you would." I let the words hang there before I said, "You didn't think I'd survive being left behind either." That landed. His face tightened, just slightly. He looked away. "I was angry," he muttered. "I thought you were weak." "And so you abandoned me?" I asked. "To prove a point?" He shook his head slowly, the motion weak and unsure. "No. I needed to know if you'd break." I blinked. Of all the twisted truths, that one sliced deepest. "You wanted me to fail?" I whispered. He didn't deny it, just closed his eyes for a moment like the weight of what he'd said was heavier than his bones could hold. I took another step inside, just one. "I read your note," I said quietly. His eyes opened again, red-rimmed, but no tears. "Then you know I regret it," he said, voice barely audible. "I don't care," I answered. "Regret doesn't undo anything. Not after 10 years of silence." He nodded once, as if that was fair. And somehow it was. The silence between us stopped being unbearable. It became something truer than anything he'd ever said to me as a child. I looked at him now, not as the man who raised me, but as someone who had mistaken fear for respect and cruelty for strength. He thought tough love meant destruction. He never learned how to nurture anything that didn't already look like him. "I'm not here to forgive you," I said. "I'm here so that when you die, you don't get to imagine I turned out broken. You don't get to lie to yourself and believe you won." He inhaled like he might cry, but the tears didn't come. Just a strained breath and a soft tremble in his fingers. "What did you do with your life?" he asked, voice thin. "I built one," I replied. "Without you. Without any of them." He didn't argue. Just closed his eyes again and whispered, "Good." That single word landed differently. It wasn't peace, but it wasn't war either. Outside the building, the air had cooled, the sky bleeding from gold into ash. Derek was waiting in the parking lot, hands shoved in his jacket, pacing near his car. "She wrote you something too," he said when he saw me, holding out another folded envelope. "Bianca?" I asked. He nodded. "She says she's changed. Therapy. Self-work. Guilt." I stared at the letter, then back at him. "She's always been good at rewriting stories," I said. "Tell her I'm not reading it." He didn't argue. Just slipped the letter back into his coat. "She's not the same person." "Neither am I said. "But she made me this version, and I'm finally okay with that." "What's that?" he asked. I smiled small but sure. "Free." Before I left town, I took a detour up a road I had once sworn I'd never drive again. The trailhead was still there, but older now, faded signs and worn benches. I sat on the same bench near the path's entrance, watching the last light sink behind the treetops. For a moment, I imagined the girl I used to be. 16 years old, carrying a too-heavy backpack, knees scraped from trying to keep up, eyes scanning for faces that never turned back. I wanted to walk into that memory, wrap my arms around her, and tell her the truth. "You're not going to disappear. You're going to rebuild. You'll become someone they can't even look in the eye without flinching. That'll be enough. More than enough." I didn't hike the trail again. I didn't need to. I already knew how it ended. I got back to Helena the next morning just as the sun slid over the mountains, the streets still sleeping, the wind softer than it had been in weeks. I walked into my apartment and dropped my keys onto the table without turning on the lights. The familiar scent of coffee grounds and lavender greeted me like it hadn't missed a beat. It felt strange, coming home from something I never meant to return to in the first place. My phone lit up the second I plugged it in. 46 missed calls this time. 5 voicemails. I didn't open a single one. Instead, I turned it off again and left it on the counter like a piece of the past I no longer owed my attention. That evening, I went back to work like nothing had changed. I tied my apron, reviewed the inventory, and helped the new hire with the register. Her hand shook the way mine once did when I was 17 and pretending I wasn't terrified of being seen. I didn't say much, but I made sure she saw me watching, steady and calm, like Lacey had once done for me. Weeks passed. I cooked. I slept. I bought new curtains and donated a coat I didn't need anymore. Life became quiet again, but not in the same way. This time the silence wasn't hiding anything. It was just silence, the kind that didn't need an apology to make sense. Then one afternoon, while I was reading on the balcony, a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name on the front in handwriting I hadn't seen in over a decade. I knew who it was from before I even opened it. Bianca. 2 pages, both sides, her words written like she was trying to sound more broken than she ever let herself be when we were kids. She wrote that she'd spent years pretending it was a joke because admitting it wasn't would mean facing who she really was. She said she was in therapy now. Said she finally told her husband the truth. Said she was sorry. At the bottom of the second page, one line stood out more than any other. You're stronger than I ever was, and I'm sorry it took losing you to see that. I didn't throw the letter away. I folded it once and placed it in a drawer I rarely opened. Not for forgiveness. Not for closure. Just to prove to myself that I hadn't imagined any of it. That someone else remembered, too, even if they were 30 steps behind the truth. Spring came, slow and cautious. Derek texted one morning with a single sentence, "He's gone." I saw the preview on my screen and deleted it without opening. I didn't cry. I didn't go to the funeral. Not out of bitterness. Not out of spite. I just didn't belong there. I wasn't the daughter they buried in stories. I wasn't the sister they used as a punchline. I wasn't the girl they left behind anymore. I was someone else entirely. In funerals, I've learned, are for the ones who need to say goodbye. I said goodbye a long time ago. Sometimes I still go hiking different mountains, different trails. I don't chase ghosts anymore. I don't walk into trees looking for answers or signs. I go to make new memories, to breathe air that doesn't carry the weight of being forgotten. One afternoon, I climbed a high ridge trail alone, nothing fancy, just quiet. The view stretched for miles, snow still clinging to the far peaks. I stood there for a long time with the wind in my face and thought, I made it. Not just out of the woods, but out of the version of me they tried to freeze in place. People ask me sometimes if I ever reconnected with my family. I always say the same thing. They found me, but they didn't recognize who I'd become. That's the thing about people who only know how to break you. They never expect you to rebuild, especially not better, especially not taller, especially not stronger than they could ever understand. A few nights ago, I had a dream I was back on the ridge. But this time I wasn't 16, and I wasn't waiting. I stood there, watching that younger version of me cry quietly into her hands, thinking they were coming back. In the dream, I walked up behind her, placed a hand on her shoulder, and said what no one ever did. Don't wait for them. They'll never be who you need them to be. But you? You'll become exactly who you're meant to be. I woke up with tears on my pillow and a sense of peace I hadn't realized I was still chasing. This morning, as I was walking to work, a man stopped in front of the bakery. Middle-aged, backpack strapped tight, shoes coated in dust. He looked around like he didn't know where he was, then stepped inside. He ordered a coffee and sat at the counter, I scanning the room. When I brought him his drink, he looked at me with a strange sort of recognition. You remind me of someone, he said. Someone who survived something. I smiled, just a little. Maybe I did. He nodded, then left without saying anything else. Later that night, when I got home, there was a small envelope under my door. Inside was a photo of the ridge, shot from behind the trees. On the back, someone had written in neat, careful handwriting. You didn't just survive. You scared us. And I think that's why we left you. No signature. I stared at it for a long time before sliding it into the drawer with Bianca's letter. Then I lit a candle, made tea, and wrote a new name in the back of my notebook. Not because I needed a new identity, but because it felt like the final line of a story I had spent too long surviving. I wasn't Nora the abandoned anymore. I wasn't anyone's cautionary tale. I wasn't the missing piece in their broken family puzzle. I was whole, and I was done.